Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us as we dive into the business case for employee engagement. Our presenters today are Scott Poeschl, PHR, and Jess Von Bank. Scott is the Vice President of Sales at Clickboarding. He's been with the HR field for over 15 years and has done everything from writing job descriptions to recruiting and hiring. 10 of those years were spent at ADP, and 2.5 were spent at Thomson Reuters doing onboarding functions there. Jess, on the other hand, brings over 13 years of experience helping employers maximize their talent acquisition capabilities. She started as a recruiting practitioner, moved over into HR technology via Jobs to Web, provided strategic guidance to SuccessFactors and SAP's largest HCM clients, and she now leads market engagement at Symphony Talent. I am incredibly excited to have both Scott and Jess online to discuss employee engagement. So once again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Kathy. Thanks for the introduction, and I am so excited as well. Thanks, Scott, for joining me today. Symphony Talent and Clickboarding are partners, and we're covering this topic together because when you think about bringing new talent into your organization, all of the tools we use from an employer branding and a recruitment marketing perspective, the candidate experience we strive to deliver, none of that really matters if you don't engage and immediately get that great new hire to productivity as quickly as possible. And onboarding plays a really, really strategic role in delivering on that employee experience. So that's what we're talking about today. We're going to break down employee engagement, what that looks like, when it really starts, the role of recruiting and onboarding as processes in that overall employee experience, the tangible wins of doing it right, or as I like to say, the cost of not doing it, the cost of doing nothing. And we want this to be interactive. We hope that you have questions, that we can provide some really strategic input. So we want this to be an open forum. There's a Q&A box available where you can submit questions or ask for clarification on anything as we go. So without further ado, let's get started. Scott, I'm going to hand it over to you to break down employee engagement and sort of set the table for us a little bit.
Yeah, so thank you, Jess, very much for that handoff there, and glad to be speaking to everybody today, because really when people talk about engaged employees, what does that look like, and when does it really start? And it starts at that verbal job offer, because you just did a really good job of, in the recruitment process, getting people excited, and then they became an employee when you gave them that verbal job offer, and you have to engage them in the culture at that point. And why do you have to engage them in the culture at that point? Well, 33%, right? We're talking about engagement. We're talking about you need engaged employees now more than ever to make them feel like engaged and connected, that you care about them, that they matter, that what they do makes a difference. When an employee feels like they truly matter to the organization, that they can make a difference or impact on the organization, that makes massive ROI. And you need to make sure those employees are seeing that, because 33% of the workforce, number on the screen, are feeling this way today. They feel like they have something great to give and that they're giving it and that they're engaged and productive. This is according to Gallup, the State of America Workplace Report. So that's really good that 33% are engaged. But what most people don't realize or don't think about, that means 67% are not engaged at work, right? So they're unengaged. That's more than 2/3 of your workforce spending an average of 8 hours a day at work, feeling like they don't care, they don't matter to you, that their impact does not serve a higher purpose. And we'll talk about the higher purpose when it comes to the I generation, the millennials, and even the baby boomers. But can you imagine that? Can you imagine going to work every day feeling like you don't matter, that no one cares? And these are the people that are applying to your open positions. So think about it. If you're engaged, you don't go looking for another job. But if you are disengaged, those are people that are applying for your job. So you need to make sure that if they're disengaged employees applying and you hire them, you quickly engage them before they show up day one. Imagine if they were actively disengaged employees. Those are the people that hurt your culture. Those are harmful. Those are what we call cancer in the business, right? You don't want to hire them in. So you have to do something in order to make sure that that person you are interviewing doesn't go back to their bad habits before day one. So it's in the overall impact to the country is that there's a $650 billion loss in productivity. So that's a big number. Let's break it down to this way. Imagine you have a department with 100 employees in that department. 67 of them are negatively impacting your productivity and your retention because they are not engaged. Quick question for you. Have you ever felt like you have been disengaged at your current job? Now, I'm glad that nobody can talk on the phone right now and say that they are, because we won't want to reveal that. But you have those off days. You feel like maybe you're pretty fortunate for some days and not for others. Other days, you go through the day like a zombie. You shouldn't have gotten out of bed. You feel a little bit out of sorts. Well, we've all witnessed this situation. We may be even seeing that today about the person that few desks down that's just mailing it in every day. They're just going through the motions. We as business leaders need to make sure we mitigate this as much as possible. We have to find ways to prevent this from happening in our business place because it spreads like wildfire, right? So what do you need to do to get in front of all this? Well, I would like to share a story about my CRO, Christine Marino, who joined an organization who she was totally engaged in the talent acquisition process. This privately held company was courting her. She was holding executive positions at publicly traded companies. This smaller business got her to wine her and dine her and totally get her excited about joining the other organization. And she left her position at this publicly traded company to join this smaller private organization. She knew that she was going to be going to New York, spending the week with her manager. There's going to be a laptop waiting for her. It was a really awesome recruiting experience. But guess what happened? When her plane landed in LaGuardia, she realized, she was notified that her boss was not going to be there, that he had taken off to do something else that he had addressed for the whole week. There was no laptop waiting for her. There was her agenda that she thought was supposed to happen didn't happen, was actually completely canceled. People weren't ready for her. So what she was left with is a hotel room and a return ticket 5 days later. So yes, she did get some awesome food and entertainment while she was in New York City, but it really made her feel uneasy about her future at this company. If they couldn't pull off day one, how are they going to pull off a fantastic career for her? So the next thing we're going to want to talk about is how does strategic onboarding play a role, and what are some of the tangible wins that you can build into this? Well, onboarding isn't just for new employees anymore. It doesn't start post-hire. So that's the first thing we need to make sure we change our mindset on, is it starts at attraction. It starts at that it starts at the recruiting process through the verbal job offer. And why do you want to do that? Well, the reason you want to do that is because with onboarding, the way it's done today, you get 60% proficiency from your employees in the first 6 months. When you use engaging onboarding, what we're going to be talking about and unpacking a little bit more here, when you use engaging onboarding from that verbal job offer or even before the job offer in the recruitment process, you can get up to an 18% increase in new hire productivity. Imagine if you had a sales department that was 18% more productive over the next 6 months. What would that do to your bottom line? Imagine you had a service department or a call center that was 18% more productive. Those are some big numbers. Now let's take a look at these next ones. This is a 3-year study. When you do onboarding correctly, that area that we're talking about, that pre-day 1 information, you may call it day 2 and through 5, but that 2 weeks where they're waiting to start, you can get a 50% increase in retention and brand loyalty over 3 years. So we know, again, going after your sales department or your call center or your white collar positions in your company, year 2 and 3, it's more expensive to replace somebody because the oral history, the oral tradition of the company is going out the door. So these are also your brand advocates, right? In the recruiting process, that's the best time to get referrals for other employees. These are the people telling everybody about their new job and how awesome it is. These are also the people through year 3 that are continuing to have their friends come to work for you. So what really goes into onboarding? So on the screen here, you may identify with these circles and you say, yep, those are the forms. I have that handled. Well, yeah, you do, because the government tells you have to have that stuff handled or you can't have the employee. Let's dive a little bit deeper on this. So recruiting or human resources are managing the onboarding process, right? This is typically maybe done on at least day 1. but there's a lot of other people involved in the process. Did you know that 37% of managers say there are 5 to 10 departments involved in getting that person on board? So hiring manager, payroll, IT, there's all these individuals responsible for tasks that are assigned to HR, which people break down to the forms. But the struggle is not everyone is involved in the onboarding has access to each other's systems. So tasks fall through the cracks. When this happens, new hires may be found, in Manhattan, unengaged, without a laptop, no boss, and they're hailing a cab, right? Maybe they're going shopping for shoes or some presents for the holidays at this point. So it's no wonder that this happens, because 83% of managing onboarding happens via email, phone calls, or in-person visits. Can you imagine that your organization is being run by email, phone calls, and in-person visits? Today, only 7% of onboarding is automated. So here's another struggle. Until the new hire's first day, it's up to HR to engage with the new hires and provide them with a great experience. This in itself is a challenge, because to do this takes a lot of orchestration, but they only are contacting HR. Many organizations struggle with onboarding because there's no map. The process is not documented. It's difficult to make this a repeatable and reliable process. So instead of collaboration, which you should happen, typically people see recruiting and HR as separate. You have talent acquisition and talent management. So you need a documented standard across this so you can scale, so you'll never lose personal touch with that individual. So you want to have a personal touch with the individual. So if you're taking notes, that's what you want to have in your onboarding. Without a standardized process that allows you to have that personal touch, your new hire feels disconnected and confused. So this is when they start to be that 67% that's unengaged. You've seen that. You've hired the people that you thought were awesome in the application process. They came in day one, disengaged, chip on their shoulder. Well, that's because they were that way before you got to them, and you just brought somebody over disengaged and you didn't engage them. So here's one. Is a recent study also says 49% of managers, so half of your managers, are frustrated by a new hire before the person shows up day one. They're frustrated by the new hire process. Now, let's look at this. You have a struggling employee who's joining the company and a frustrated manager. That's a great way to build a culture, right? So let's make sure we don't frustrate the managers with this process and we engage the employees. Okay, so now let's move on to necessary requirements. There are required forms. By no means am I saying stop doing the I-9 and W-4. I'm not saying that they don't matter. Okay? Audits continue to rise and fines imposed and inaccuracies and all that. But without electronic forms, electronic signatures, online systems, HR is going to struggle with being 100% confident the organization isn't at risk. And the new hire, especially if they're completing these forms manually, they're looking confused and frustrated by this antiquated process. I was dealing with a large tech company the other day, and they hire lots of engineers and these very techie people. And they actually said to me that their engineers, it looks like they're breaking out in hives when they have to touch the papers to fill them out, right? If you're a tech company or you pride yourself on technology, you want to make sure you're engaging them on their cell phone while you're onboarding them. All right, let's talk about being connected, comfortable, and informed. Does the new hire know where to go day one? Do they have a day one itinerary telling them when to come and when to leave? Are they aligned with a mentor? Do they know the dress code? Many of us have studied Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Is your onboarding addressing that so they feel safe day one, they're ready to go? Should they pack a lunch? Is the team taking them out for lunch? Are they able to complete all of these needs that they have and these onboarding tasks at home on their iPad while clicking through Netflix? So we need to make sure we're taking a look at things like the millennial generation or the I generation. Millennials will give up pay to be part of something bigger. And the I generation has a safety issue where they need to handle their safety through technology. And that's what they want, safety through technology, before they'll talk to anybody. So you need to make sure you're talking to all of these different melting pot of generations that we have in the workforce today. So many organizations have some of these items addressed. Like the forms on the screen, you have that taken care of. I know you do. But you're not doing the engagement part of it. So missing these components and expecting a prepared and comfortable and engaged new employee, you're setting yourself up and the organization for failure. But who has the time to address this? 71% of managers right now are orchestrating 9 interaction points that they have to orchestrate from job offer all the way through to day one to mechanically hire that employee. You have the time. Right now you're wasting it on, or most people are wasting it on spinning their wheels on these 9 interaction points. So Jess, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass it over to you here to talk about the role of recruitment and advocacy.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, you did a great job of setting up employee engagement and when it actually starts. And it's important to remember the role of the recruiter in this entire employee experience that we're trying to deliver. Now, I'm a former recruiter, so I'm biased, but I'm happily biased. I will always talk about the role of the recruiter and the sourcer as being so critical because they're literally the face of your company and the first experience potential talent has of your brand. Your consumer brand, by the way, but most importantly, your employer brand. They're literally a living, breathing representation of the employee experience. They are an employee, they're experiencing it themselves. They're a representation of the culture that your new hire can come to expect. And their job is to sell the opportunity and the overall employer value proposition that's being offered to potential talent. So in other words, they are an employee advocate. They are a built-in brand ambassador. And you talked a little bit, Scott, about converting that new hire to a brand ambassador as quickly as possible. So the role of the recruiter, by the way, if they don't understand that role, their role as an evangelist, as an advocate, as an ambassador, if they don't know how to articulate the employer value proposition in a really succinct and compelling way, they should probably be trained on that. So many times there are a lot of transactions and systems and processes a recruiter has to know and understand, but they really have to understand how to convey brand and culture and the employer value proposition. So that's the role of recruiting in shaping the overall employee experience. When we think about employer branding and recruitment marketing, obviously, you know, we talk about the candidate experience, and that candidate experience needs to be unified. It needs to be consistent. And we talk a lot about the consumer candidate. When you think about job seekers, everyday people, we're all consumers, we're digital creatures, we're highly social. We walk around with these mobile devices in our hands that give us instant access to anything, information, transactions, going on to Amazon, ordering groceries. Everything we do online involves a beautiful UI. It's mobile, it's responsive, it knows us, you know, it recognizes us when we come back. All of those things that we expect and have come to accept as a consumer really should apply to us as a job seeker as well. Now, if we're not getting that kind of unified, end-to-end, beautiful experience from your employer brand, just like we do on the consumer side, and if it's not consistent and maintained from the candidate to the employee experience, you're kind of in trouble. And one of the reasons you're in trouble, if you don't deliver on your brand promise and the overall experience we expect, one of those reasons is the power of word of mouth, to be honest. 41% who have a negative experience of your company and your brand will become a detractor. They will actively take their relationship to your competition. That is as true for job seekers as it is for consumers. The good news is, the bright side, 81% who have positive experiences of your company, of your brand, will share that experience. They will talk about it with their inner circles. When you enable that sharing and actually ask people to do it for you, that's called influencer marketing. That's a very popular notion on the consumer side. It's also called employee advocacy. It's turning those people into active brand ambassadors for your company. Now, 2/3 of those who have negative experiences will also share that with their inner circles. We talked about those that will take that relationship elsewhere. But it's notable here that more people who have a positive experience will share than those who have a negative. So So it's important. That's the point here. You have to get it right. You have to, you can run, but you can't hide from the experience that you deliver. It does matter. It has financial impact to the bottom line of your organization. So delivering on that experience, the workforce experience, that employee engagement that you strive to drive and to deliver on starts with recruiting, and it needs to be continued consistently throughout the employee's journey with your organization. Now, we really love the analogy between dating and recruiting. We do, I do, but that's because it works. There's the introduction, there's the getting to know you period. And once a job seeker, potential talent, has become aware of your opportunity and aware of your brand, and there's interest there, there's a courtship period that happens. There's the first date, that's maybe the first phone call with a recruiter, whatever that is. And it can go really, really well on both sides. But if you don't take the active step to continue that process, to continue that courtship, somebody else is asking that job seeker on a first date, and they're delivering an amazing experience as a candidate and of their brand. So there's the potential for you to waste all of the effort that went into talent attraction, all of the work of your employer brand and your recruitment marketing, all those great ads that you're personalizing and you're putting in front of job seekers where they're spending their time online. It's all for nothing if you don't maintain that consistent experience of your brand and that consistent candidate to employee experience as you bring them through the process. So what does that look like? What is the tie between recruitment and engagement? First of all, it starts with the articulation of your employer brand. And I like to make the point here that your employer brand is curated. It's not created. And I mean that by saying it has to be authentic. It has to be the actual transparent, authentic experience of employees in your organization and what that feels like, what it looks like, what your culture is really like. That is something that you curate out of your employees and out of your culture, and then you find a way to articulate that and to activate that. Now, sure, employer brand, and there are a lot of experts out there that would say employer brand can also be somewhat aspirational. You can create an aspirational brand that you're aspiring to be, but it has to be authentic. It has to be real and what exists, what your own current employees can relate to and say is true, or it's just not authentic, and that will show itself sooner rather than later. And then make sure it's consistent. Use your brand, activate it everywhere. Activate it through employee advocates. We've talked about how important it is to convert that new hire to an active, engaged advocate of your company as soon as possible. And train everybody who's involved. Again, I said earlier, if your recruiters don't feel comfortable with a 5 minutes, sort of explanation of your company and your culture, your employer value proposition, and certainly a 30-second elevator pitch of the same, sort of version of that, then train them, make them really comfortable with talking about your culture, who you are, what you do, what you're all about. We're finding more and more Gen Z and millennials want to work for a company that has social responsibility. They want to do work that matters. And so you have to be able to explain that and to articulate that in a compelling way, or you're not doing the best job you can of attracting the right talent to your organization. And then follow a cadence. It's really as simple as, sort of laying out who does what and when. When does that candidate get handed off for the next step in the process? And is that person enabled and empowered to deliver the right message, to deliver that consistent and unified experience all the way through the candidate journey to the point where they become a new hire, and then from day one and beyond. So it's really important that you get everyone involved. Hiring managers certainly need, Scott, you talked about the pain that hiring managers can feel in completing all of the transactions and all of the steps that are required to just get that great new hire in the door. up to speed and to productivity as quickly as possible. So get them trained on what happens when and who completes what. It's very collaborative. You might have to involve some different departments, but lay it out. Who's involved? What's their role? Get the support of peers, and then, of course, activate leaders in that process as well. Everybody has to understand and be invested in the overall experience that they're playing a role to help deliver.
And Jess, that's a good point to bring up there when you're getting everybody involved. I've talked a little bit about my background. So, post day one, I've been in organizations a few times where we've spun up mentor programs or buddy programs or leadership programs to show people a future of their career or what it's like to be at the organization. And to your point there is everybody has to have a cadence or what to follow prior to day one. Why start talking about somebody's future after they've already been there for 30 days? Start talking about it from the moment that they accept that verbal job offer.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when we think about the role of the sourcer and of the recruiter, again, we think all about the talent attraction phase. The process of conveying the opportunity and attracting potential new talent to the organization, selling them on the opportunity, on the culture, making the almighty job offer. That was always my favorite part of the job as a recruiter, getting that verbal acceptance. And then you feel like your job is done. Great, you're only as good as your next great hire, right? As a recruiter. No, the job is not done, because now that they've accepted that offer, anybody who works in this field knows this. That's actually the really critical point when they have to give notice in their current position. There's sort of that waiting period between leaving one job and starting the new job. Put yourself in the shoes of the candidate. They're hoping they made the right decision. They're really excited about their new opportunity. They're starting to tell their friends and family about it. This is the most critical. This is sort of the moment of truth, is what they got excited about and what you promised them going to come true. You have to continue that engagement and continue to deliver on that employee experience, or you're already losing engagement. They're already getting nervous and excited. They show up, like Christine's example. Are you ready for them? Do you have what they need to get started, to stay excited and motivated? And most importantly, from a business impact perspective, are you ready to get them to productivity as quickly as possible? Every day you're not driving engagement and driving productivity, you're losing ROI on that great new hire you just made. So the critical takeaway here is not to let engagement drop or stop after the offer is extended and accepted. If you do, you're introducing yourself to risk that amazing new hire may actually become a no hire or a low engaged, low performing employee. Now, there's a couple things that can happen. I talked about that, that phase between offer acceptance and the actual first day of work. 4% of new hires actually don't show up on their first day of work. So that's the first risk that we run. If you don't maintain that level of engagement and do that through a strategic onboarding process, 4% won't even show up. Lots of reasons for that. Perhaps they accepted a counteroffer. Perhaps they got cold feet. Perhaps it was never quite the right match to start with, and that's a different conversation. How well did you fill the position with the right person, right fit hiring? But 4% won't even show up for lots of different reasons. Now, if you continue to drive engagement and create an experience, you probably could have prevented some of those no-shows.
Yep. And Jess, I want to talk a little about that ROI right there, where you're talking about that 4% don't show up for day one. SHRM gives actual number to that hiring, and that's going to be about a $16,000 loss per 100 people that you hire. So there's real impact to your organization. If you're hiring 200 people, that's 32,000. I know we have people on the phone that are hiring thousands and thousands of employees. So this is a real thing you want to look at is, Jess was talking about that. Maybe it was a wrong fit. That's a sourcing piece. But over half of those people are getting cognitive dissonance in their head. They were the right person and maybe a spouse, significant other was not engaged. You have to engage the employee during onboarding, and let's take the next step. You have to engage their circle around them. You have to engage spouses, significant others. Other people have to live the dream that they were seeing during the recruiting process. So when they live the dream, when they show up day one, they're going to live out that dream. And I'll hand it over to you here, Jess, on the next slide, to what happens when they're living out that dream when they join.
Yeah, and these stats get really painful to me as a former recruiter, because I know and even as a solution provider now, we create all of these amazing solutions and pieces of technology to help attract that great new hire to your organization. So I know very well the time, the effort, the investment you make in attracting the right person to the right opportunity. So unfortunately, that the 4% who don't even show, that's painful enough. The next one that is so painful to me is 20% who leave within the first 45 days of employment. The candidate, so they show up, and for, again, lots of potential reasons, either they're unengaged or quickly become, sort of actively disengaged, that disenfranchisement you talk about. Or if it doesn't ring true, if the candidate experience doesn't match the employee experience, it feels like a little bit of a bait and switch. They're not ready for me. This isn't the job I signed up for. The culture you represented in your employer brand and your recruitment marketing, that's not actually what I'm seeing and what I'm experiencing here. Maybe there's dissonance with the hiring manager or the work you're being asked to do. For lots of reasons, 20% will leave within the initial period of employment. Again, talk about the business impact. Not only did you invest time, effort, resources in recruiting that talent to your organization, I call this repeat recruiting. Now you've got to start that process all over again to refill that position, and you've wasted that period of time. That potential productivity for a new employee is out the window. So it's immediate impact to your organization, and they're probably walking to your competition. That's another problem.
And with that, Jess, I've some examples of companies, a construction company I'm working with where he has a high turnover piece, and when he put an engaged onboarding into place, he was finding that he was having these turnover positions showing up again and again, day after day. So he found even in that high transaction piece, in a 12-minute onboarding experience that he was giving them, he was having people come back again and again and again. So it really is about that really awesome recruiting experience being carried through to their day one or day 5, however you look at onboarding, so that they can go into the ongoing phase with your company and not turn over.
Awesome. That's a great example. So hopefully we've painted the picture that employee engagement matters. It really does. It's all about HR creating a workforce experience, and that breaks down lots of ways. It starts very early on with recruiting and advocacy, and it carries all the way through the offer and post-hire. So let's talk about some actionable takeaways. If people have we've talked about this notion that employee engagement matters from a business standpoint, from a business impact standpoint. What are some takeaways that we can share with people? I'm going to throw out the first one because I've talked about this. Employer brand is curated, not created. It can be somewhat aspirational, but it really needs to be curated. That's because it has to be authentic. It has to be real. When the candidate becomes an employee, they need to see that the culture is what they were told to expect, that the employer value proposition is what you sold them on, and that experience, that candidate to employee experience, that's a workforce experience that needs to ring true, or all of that effort up front to attract the right talent to your organization is sort of wasted. And Scott, I'd like you to reiterate what you mentioned earlier about when to activate that new hire as an advocate.
Yeah, and the time to do that is upon the verbal job offer, right? Because that's when they're going out and they're trumpeting to everybody that they just got this awesome job. And when you have this, on their cell phone, they just got off the phone getting that verbal job offer, and then they're looking at their cell phone and they're seeing maybe a picture of a leader of the company or a short little video. And the thing is they're being told about their benefits, and they don't realize that they're doing their quick quote onboarding. They're realizing they're being welcomed to the company. Yes, all of that other stuff, the paperwork, bad word, paperwork, all that stuff is happening, but they're being curated into the company. They're telling everybody, they can show other people their cell phone, they could show other people what they're going through and articulate, like you were saying, Jess, your recruiters better be able to articulate the vision. Your new hire is going to be able to articulate the vision before they show up day one, or at least to articulate it to themselves internally. So that's going to point number 2 there is upon that verbal job offer is the time to make sure that that new hire feels ready to go. And onboarding goes in so many different directions when you're thinking about it. This is also the time to ask those employees for other referrals or other hires. So Jess, I'll let you talk a little bit to that asking aspect of this is the time to get employee referrals.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big believer. Everybody knows my role at Symphony Talent and prior at Q Social was built on, this notion of creating raving fans of your brand. And one of those should certainly be your employees, obviously your customers as well. But creating employee advocates is one of the lowest cost things you can do from a recruitment marketing perspective. They're sitting on massive networks of friends and family who trust them, and enabling them with your culture, your brand, with your message, making them another spoke in the wheel of your content marketing is one of the cheapest things you can do with the highest payoff. That's because, as I said earlier, people trust faces, not brands. We trust our friends and family. When I say something about my employee experience, where I work, the work I do, projects I'm performing on, what it's like, why my company is amazing, that goes a lot further than the company saying it on their brand, channels, their social channels, their company career website alone. And my network is massive. It takes a brand a long time and sometimes some money to build up a following. So it's a really powerful arm in terms of activating your employer brand and including that messaging with employee advocates as part of your content marketing. And the ask is easy. If I'm an engaged employee, I'm proud of the work that I'm doing. I'm living and breathing the culture. I'm the only person that wakes up thinking about your brand every day. Your customers certainly aren't. Your employees are. So that ask is super easy. And this is sort of like a happy chicken and egg scenario. It doesn't matter which one comes first. The fact is, employee engagement drives advocacy. If I'm engaged, I'm happy to become an advocate. And advocacy also drives employee engagement. If you've asked me to be an ambassador of your company, you've given me permission, you've enabled me with great content, you've made it easy for me to advocate on behalf of the work I'm doing and where I'm doing it, I become a more engaged employee. So again, it's like this happy little circle, the chicken or the egg. It doesn't even matter because one drives the other and everybody wins. So the point is, do it upon hire. I'm still in the honeymoon phase. If I've just accepted a job offer, it's a way to continue my experience and ensure seamless, transition into the employee experience. But I'm also sort of at an all-time high, right? I'm super excited. So make the ask upon hire, and then you've got an advocate throughout their employee experience.
And just a quick point on that one is a good way today to look at, or at least I have found over the last few years, a good way to see if you got that employee engaged is how quickly they change their LinkedIn profile over to their new role. I said I did onboarding at Thomson Reuters, and there the turnover in the 2 departments that they hired me in to work with was 49% first year. And we drove it down to 8% and held it there for a year and a half. And before that, people would enter in and they were kind of wary about what was going on, and they wouldn't change their LinkedIn profile for a couple of weeks or a month. It's because they were still looking for other jobs. Right. And so now what I see there, I've seen a couple of other roles I've had is people are changing their LinkedIn profile the moment they accept that job offer, before they're showing up day one. You can see that they're that engaged with their brand. I have a tech company that during their onboarding, the second that the employee accepts the job offer, a message goes out to the department. The system automatically handles it, goes out to the department saying, connect with them on LinkedIn. So the person sitting there doing their onboarding on their phone, and all of a sudden they're getting LinkedIn requests from all their future coworkers from their department. So really it's a time, and I find that LinkedIn is a good way to gauge that engagement.
That's a really great point. The other thing we talk about, and I've mentioned it a couple of times myself, is this experience, the almighty experience we're looking to deliver. We talk a lot about candidate experience. It becomes the employee experience. We refer to Amazon a lot, and there's a reason for that. It's a very slick, seamless UI. When I come back to Amazon, it remembers me, it recommends things to me, it's very personalized, and it's easy. I mean, it honestly could not be easier, and that's why we refer to that experience a lot when we think about the online transactional, sort of engagement that happens between a job seeker and your brand. And you really have to deliver that experience at every stage. Again, when you activate your brand and when you put all of your, your recruitment marketing out there, everything you're doing to get the right attention from the right audience. And then once you engage them in an actual process, the job seeker experience, that needs to be mobile. It needs to be easy. It needs to be consistent and unified. If I'm getting sort of a disjointed, broken experience and it's not easy on mobile, I bail faster than you can blink. That's true of how we behave online as consumers. It's absolutely true of how we behave online as job seekers. And it bleeds into the employee experience. We won't even get into, all of the ways that we go about conducting work, interacting with HR systems, the actual business of being an employee. That needs to be a beautiful experience as well. That's a topic for another day. But the point is a consistent, unified experience from early on job seeker talent attraction phase all the way through the hiring and onboarding and from day one and beyond.
And Jess, that's a good point. I like Amazon. Everybody can identify with that because you're bought into that product you're looking at on the screen. You're not thinking about the logistics or even the store that it's coming from. You're bought in with that, what's right there in front of you. And another, you think about like Netflix, or you think about these other companies that have it figured out. Disney is a perfect example. As a hobby piece that I do, I work with some kids, and it's amazing to listen to them. They're able to see something once from Disney and quote it and say it, and they're all on the same page. And that's kind of the experience you want to deliver from the recruiting process, onboarding, and ongoing, is they're bought into your brand. They're saying it. It doesn't take a lot because you already have the hook in them. Let's make sure that they're having that Disney experience, that they're taken to a whole new world. Hopefully I can say that without copyright infringement. Strategic onboarding. So we struggled with exactly how to write these words, so I want to make sure we talk about this one here. Strategic onboarding is as simple as mapping out the key steps that need to take place to support the overall employee experience. So the reason we were struggling with the words on this one is when you look at onboarding, mapping out steps, that's what most people stop at. I make a process and I have the necessary steps to make it happen. Flip it on its head. Read the sentence in reverse, and you start with employee experience is overall. That's the part that you want to make sure you're doing when you look at strategic onboarding is experience overall what they're getting going to make them an engaged employee? Then what are the steps that need to happen to support that? Everything from the mentor calling them or the manager calling them ahead of time saying that there's lunch, to the necessary forms that it takes to hire people in the States or in other countries, to the chair being at their desk. Nothing says you're not important more than not having your computer at your desk. Again, going back to Thomson Reuters, I was trying to solve all these problems that were happening, and one of the problems I was finding is people didn't have a computer or a phone at their desk for their first week. And when I dug into it, the employee experience, we weren't showing them their desk for the whole first week. We were keeping them in a classroom. And why was it? Well, technology didn't even know that the person was going to be starting until the day that they'd showed up, because of all the processes that had to happen behind the scenes, where we talked about how it's driven by email, it's driven by in-person visits, and there's no report back. So you want to make sure that employee experience overall is what you're going after for your strategic onboarding.
Now, we've talked about the benefits, the tangible wins, reducing the chance of an employee not showing up for their first day of work, or the retention impact, not being able to keep them. 20% quit within the first 45 days. So there are some real tangible wins to putting in these key steps and these really simple measures to avoid all of that, to avoid the waste of, having to re-recruit and fill the same positions over time. I like to refer to it as the cost of doing nothing. It is significant. The business impact of not delivering on experience. They'll walk to your competition. They'll give their loyalty to another brand. They'll share whatever their experience was, positive or negative, with their inner circles. And if they're sharing a positive experience, the benefit of, the tangible wins you get of that word of mouth, the power of advocacy, are real. There's real impact to your organization. So hopefully we've conveyed that. The cost of repeat recruiting and the cost of a disengaged, especially an actively disengaged, a truly disenfranchised employee who's not producing the work they should be, but even an employee who's not as engaged as they could be. There's a loss of productivity there too. It really dulls your competitive edge, and it has real impact to the bottom line of your business. So,
hey Jess, do you know what the 7 most expensive words in business are?
Please remind me. Please tell me. I might have heard it before. Please tell me.
We have always done it this way.
Oh my goodness. It's so true.
So we're taking a look at this whole webinar that we've been doing, and we're talking about moving forward. I run another webinar that's why address your onboarding even if it works. It's because it's not great. The employee experience that you need to have gives you that competitive edge. Newsflash, if you guys haven't heard of, Glassdoor is a real thing, right? That people are leaving reviews about your recruiting process, about your onboarding process, about your company. You can make some significant changes and significant headway by addressing your onboarding, by addressing your recruiting, your onboarding, and your day 1, week 1 activities.
Absolutely. Scott, thank you so much for helping me cover this. It's a really important topic, the whole notion of employee experience, of workforce experience. And hopefully we showed that it begins at recruiting. Advocacy is critical, and strategic onboarding is absolutely important in sort of, drawing that bridge between the candidate and the employee experience. So I'm curious to know, Kathy, do we have any questions? Anything that we'd like to go back and clarify or add to?
Yeah, we do have a few questions here. The first one being, what are some quick and easy recruitment marketing tactics that can help really boost engagement? Something that you can implement.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot that goes into recruitment marketing. At Symphony Talent, we talk about omni-channel, the notion that job seekers, just like, are people, and we spend our time in lots of places online. So you have to have your message on multiple channels, multiple touch points. And so it's really sort of understanding who you're trying to attract, that's personas, and then putting yourself where they are. And that might be different by persona. So perhaps you have, day in the life type content that you share about your culture, what it's like to work for the company, what kind of work people are doing, and you might convey that in different ways. We've done a lot of great analytics research at Symphony Talent to show what drives engagement on which social channel, for example. On LinkedIn, we like to see pictures of workplaces and buildings and the actual space that people work in. Whereas on Instagram, we like to see faces. We like to see people. I want to see people doing their work. I want to know what the lunchroom looks like, and I feel like I'm getting a sneak peek at the life of an employee at your company. And at Facebook, on Facebook, it's video. Video is everything on Facebook, and a lot of these things. I mean, you'd be surprised. You don't need professional videographers and professional photographers traipsing around the office. Guess who's a great source of content? Your employees. Getting real, that's what makes it feel authentic and what makes it perform better as content. So I would say one of the best things you can do is leverage your own employees, make them advocates, give them great content, and that content can be employee generated. Let them help you tell the story. It's all about storytelling in recruitment marketing. That's probably one of the best things I can say that's sort of low-hanging fruit. If you're not doing it already, it will perform better than any other advertising you can put out there. It feels real, so it performs better when it's more authentic, and your employees can help you with it.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that answer. The second question I have here is, what information would you share with a new hire during the onboarding process to make them feel engaged with your company before they start?
Oh, that's wonderful. That's actually a really good follow-up to what Jess was just going over there, is you need to make them engage with the brand or the location or the group that they're going into. So when you're showing them what to wear day one, because they're worried about what to wear day one, they don't want to be that 22-year-old guy who wears a black suit, white shirt to work, and it's not the right environment for that, and he feels awkward his whole first day. And I was a 22-year-old guy a long time ago, so I can pick on them. But what you want to do is you want to show them maybe a picture of what the work environment is. So they come in the flip-flops and shorts, because that's a tech company, or you want to show them who the leader is or the division manager, or so they can see who those leadership is around them. Videos. I do a fun video that talks to people about how to join or when they're joining clickboarding, and I show them the weight room and then I show them the free soda to let them know we have them handled on both sides of that issue. Right? So what you want to do is you want to embrace that. Now I want to speak to how can you even go further into the cultural aspects or curated is in a manufacturing sector where you may have PPE that they have to be wearing and you have a blue line or a yellow line culture, right? When you cross that line, you have to have the PPE on. When you put that into your onboarding and you start talking about the safety culture, you'll actually see your first 30-day safety record improve. So what is important to you as an organization? That's what you want to make sure you're highlighting in onboarding. Videos, pictures, that's how you do it.
All right. Thank you so much. And I believe that covers the questions that we have. Anybody else, if you'd like to chime in, please feel free to enter it into the Q&A section. If not, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a fantastic discussion.
Yeah, so much fun. Thank you, Kathy, for moderating.
Fantastic.
Scott, whole clipboarding team, thanks for joining us here at Symphony Talent. Fantastic topic. Everybody will get the recording and the slides as follow-up, and we're always open to additional questions offline. Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.